name is Sara Clark. I'm an oil painter. I drew ever since I was little. I always drew. My grandmother taught me a lot of things about drawing and creativity and imagination. And my dad did too. He was a doctor, but he was a very good draftsman. And he taught me things too. And when he was in medical school, I would sit on his desk and draw pictures from his books. That's the earliest memory I have. But I always drew, always. So I just continued. I think when I went to graduate school, when I was undergraduate, in my earlier academic training, I did everything. I mean, I tried this and that, and different techniques, different approaches, different color theories, and which is good. I mean, I just wanted to see where I wanted to go. And in graduate school, I focused on mathematical objects, geometric objects that it's topology. And topology is the kind of mathematics that if you take a shape and it were made out of clay or rubber and you stretched it, it'd be equivalent to the shape it was originally. So it's like if you had a sphere and you stretched it out, it would still have the same qualities. So topology looked at these shapes that are mental objects, they are platonic objects, as something that I could modify and stretch and change and still keep with the feature of the shape, but kind of hang it on metaphors here and there. This is not didactic. I don't want to teach anybody anything about the mathematics or the actual formulas that may be associated with these objects, but so I can have a little bit of imagination in there. I'll come across something that I like. This is a Mobius strip, and I modified it. So I'll get the idea, because they're basic shapes, but then if you stretch and modify them, then they can be anything. The patterns. What I'm doing is using some of the imagery that's used in medical, scientific, mathematical works where you have barcodes and scatter plots with circles, any other graphic patterns that are used in all kinds of equations that you would see. Different kinds of imagery, like that even in economics you would see. And these are kind of scientific setups, as if they were different objects that we normally see. And I've always been a colorist, so I started working first. The color was so complex. It's a very complex area to negotiate. And I started working with just earth colors, natural colors, like what they used in medieval times or the Renaissance, or nothing chemically made. And then slowly introduced stronger colors and started manipulating the colors. I look at the Renaissance painting, say Giovanni Bellini, for the richness of the color. I look at an earlier artist, Piero della Francesca, for geometry, and he was a pioneer in linear perspective. And that's one way I got into geometry, was looking at linear perspective and how you use science, combine it with art, and that's interesting. And then later people like De Chirico, Giorgio De Chirico, or artists in that period. Those are like the base artists for me from days ago. If you ask me who my favorite artist is, I'd probably say Leonardo da Vinci. But I look at art everywhere, and I respond to it positively at all levels. And my art is sometimes I go, I think I really like that, and then sometimes I go, well, we'll move on. It's never perfect. If it were perfect, I wouldn't do another one. The first thing I do is I'll get a general idea, but I have to figure out where they belong, what space they need to be in. And what I do is often is do multiple drawings, sketch out ideas. I often grid off the surfaces. They're not always just in a grid pattern, but they can be diagonals as well. And that helps me place objects. So it helps with composition. So I do lots of sketches. I do watercolor, gouache, little small paintings to get ideas out. Whatever I decide first never is what happens in the end. They change all through the painting process. What I do sometimes is take those shapes and manipulate them in the computer. And these are Feynman diagrams. And he was a physicist. Sometimes I'll combine the shapes together, things like that. But I manipulate them on the computer so that I can take a standard shape and make it my own. I will set up, a lot of times I'll set up little things that as a model. I used to work with these shapes just in my head. I didn't want to use the computer. And then I found out that I couldn't turn things around the way I imagined them. So the computer helped me take shapes like, this is a torus right here. And I just kept twisting it. And it's okay that nobody knows that it's a torus. It does look like a rounded thing, but I wanted to do something that was twisted like that. And that's hard to do just in your head. So I do take things, put them in the computer, and then I'll print them out. And like with colored pencils and whatnot, when I'm not up here, and do like I could create a composition this way or this way or this way, to just get some ideas out. I just do these and get ideas out. And you can see more of the barcodes and whatnot. And then I practice naming everything. Which naming is always a challenge. I mean, it's like I get anxious to work, and you don't want to do busy work. So I want to make sure what I'm doing is what I want to do. So that's why I do a lot of the models, and that helps me. And also when I do little the watercolors and whatnot, that's another way of getting some ideas on paper. And I think that's a lot of creativity. It's like I don't really get an intuition. I come up here and work. You can't rush it at all. I tend now to spend more time looking than I used to. Right, at the paintings and thinking about, is this finished, is this enough? And it's like, maybe not. You can play with that idea for a long time, but you have to find out what your, I suppose your limit is, or your boundary is for certain ideas. I usually work, I've got 2 here and 3 small ones over here. I usually work on 4 or 5 at the same time. If I work on one, if I have to wait for paint to dry, then I have a lot of time of not doing anything. Also, when I work on multiple ones, I don't get trapped into just one focus. I can kind of rest on that a bit and then go to another one for a while. And then it's like suddenly I finish 5 paintings. But, I work on them over several months. I want it to be a visual experience, and I think a lot of people do see the mathematic idea in there, even if they don't. I don't care if I don't want them to come in and say, oh, topology. Some people have done that. But I want it to be a visual experience and things that seem somewhat familiar. And I also like having them somewhat human-sized, as if you could pick it up and hold it. So it's like experience it in that way. I'm kind of thinking of the objects being in like a composition of a formula, and the barcodes and whatnot. You're only seeing parts of them, but it's telling a story, or it could be telling a story. I mean, these are kind of images we've seen before, the barcodes and the spheres and the heat waves and all of that I use. So it's just part of that to be a backdrop, kind of like where they exist. I do kind of think of them as like formulas. But I want somebody to come and say, oh, these are meaningful objects in the relationship together. And that was kind of like the metaphysical art of de Chirico, putting things together that you don't expect to be together. Like, what does this mean? Yeah. And people can bring their own interpretations if they want to it. So I don't expect someone to come up and say, oh, I know what that's about. Because I would say, tell me. Yeah, these are not intended to be specific concepts. This one is called Terpsichore, and Terpsichore was one of the 9 muses, and she was the muse for dance. And everyone said, oh, it's like somebody's dancing. So I thought, well, that's nice. And I mean, I think all these shapes are kind of like my muses. And they also, I have a group of characters that I put in the work that you will see in other works, like some of the spheres, some of the barcodes. I mean, it's like, what actor's coming in today? That kind of thing. When I get to this one, it will change, but I'm thinking like, who are you? Where do you belong? Make it feel like it fits, make it work. And that's a hard thing. But the challenge is interesting and it's fun. It feels good to work hard and then finally make a breakthrough. It's kind of like, I associate it with scientific intuition and imagination. I mean, because it's all not just in formula, but it's like how you feel about it and think about it. One thing about my work, picking a mental object as something to depict, I think is interesting because I'm focused on how my mind works, how I think, what I'm thinking about, as opposed to feelings or expression in that sense. There's more of an aesthetic emotion in these pieces. But it is about how I think, and I kind of feel like when I work, I'm between thought and language. It's not always, there are no words that I can use to describe what I'm thinking about as I'm doing it. So that's an interesting area to be in. So, it's like not descriptive. It's often like, sometimes if you explain something to someone and they're not getting it, you get a pencil and a piece of paper, and you go, okay, see this? It's kind of like that. It's what I feel like I'm doing every time. And I'm not sure exactly what I'm trying to get through at first. But it's that space between thought and language.